Great. So welcome. I'm Ross Yelsey. I work here in the Columbia Journalism School Office of Admission, and I'm really happy to see people tuning in to join this session from all over the US, all over the world to learn more about our PhD in Communications program. This is a program we get a lot of inquiries about all year round. It's a really unique program, so I'm really happy we'll have the chance to hear more about it, get some questions answered, and get to hear from faculty and alumni from the program. And I'm very happy today to have Andy Tucker, who's the H. Gordon Garbedian Professor of Journalism and the Director of the doctoral program here joining us, along with Ava Sira, who's a graduate, I think 2021 from the PhD in Communications program, who's a senior global positioning and strategy manager for the Boston Consulting Group, as well as a faculty member at the NYU Stern School. So I'm very happy to have that perspective of an alum a part of our conversation too. But I thought to start our conversation, I'll ask Andy just a little bit about this program for people who are maybe just getting acquainted with it. What is the PhD in Communications program maybe compared to other programs out there that have communications maybe in the name? What is kind of unique about our curriculum, and why is multidisciplinarity a real important part of what we do here?
Yeah, that's what really distinguishes us. The communications PhD program at Columbia Journalism School is very small. It has a very small faculty. It has a very small student body, which means that everybody gets to know everybody and works with everybody. What's intellectually different about our program is that many communications PhD programs have a list of courses you take. Communications 4012, communications 6002. What we do is we have a small set of required courses, but we offer our students the opportunity to put together a course of study that draws on the resources of any of the graduate divisions of the university. Our guiding light is that communications is a sprawling discipline, sometimes a little unnervingly sprawling, but that informs and is informed by many other different disciplines, especially at a large research university. So we offer the students the opportunity to put together their own course of study that draws on the divisions and departments that interest them, and that really allows them to consider the influence and the importance of communications across disciplines. It's even hard to define what communications is, but we usually say we look at the intellectual, academics, sociological, historical aspects of the way that people have exchanged information in society. Yep, that's really broad.
Cool. Just to maybe focus it a little bit, I know this program has some things that we have some particular strengths in. Are there some research areas that we can really support well with the faculty and kind of the resources at Columbia?
Yes, yes. Our faculty is particularly interested in journalism history, journalism studies, um, communications history, sociology of news, media technology, law and policy, misinformation and disinformation, social media and public life, religion and media, right-wing media, freedom of expression. Those are all areas that our faculty and some of our students are working in, although we certainly don't limit ourselves to those areas.
Right. Great. Ava, I know going into a doctoral program is a big commitment. Can you take people back and tell us a little bit about what you were doing before you came to graduate school and how you decided that a doctoral degree was something you wanted to pursue?
Yeah, it certainly is a big commitment. I had started off my career in advertising, and I was having a slight ethical crisis working on pharmaceutical advertising. And then at the same time, the New York Times had released an innovation report essentially saying that a lot of their ad revenue had been eaten by big tech at the time when Facebook was called Facebook instead of Meta. And I ended up working over there in their branded content studio. So they were looking for people in an advertising function working in a news organization. And as I went through that role, I realized that the journalism education that I had, even though I studied journalism and communications in undergrad, didn't really prepare me for the types of ethical questions that I was having. And also, the way the business model had changed was really fascinating to me. And it's often hard when you're working to pause and really think deeply about what are the implications of what I'm seeing, because it wasn't tracking against my previous education. I think we see this a lot just with technology and our economic environment in general. Things change very quickly. So the PhD for me was in a choice that I didn't feel was a choice. I felt like I had to pause and really think about what I was doing. And I was lucky enough to get into a program that kept me in the city. So yeah, I think it was kind of ethically motivated and curiosity got the best of me.
Yeah, and what was that process like? I know, people in this session who are watching right now are maybe looking at different programs out there. What was your kind of research process like of looking at different doctoral programs, and how did it come to, mind that this was a program that might be really best suited for what you wanted to do?
Yeah, I think to Andy's point, the flexibility and the ability to touch multiple disciplines and bring it together in an area of your doctoral research or just your own interest was very appealing to me. A lot of the other programs I looked at seemed to have a grounding in a certain methodology that they liked their students to take. And of course, that makes good sense for my project and my interests. I just wanted a little bit more flexibility. I also really enjoyed that Columbia makes it very easy for you to touch different departments within the university. So, I took classes in the creative writing department or the sociology department, and that is just something that a lot of other programs didn't offer. Again, I say all this with a grain of salt, given my interests are at the intersection of, media, comms, and journalism, and different programs cater to different interests.
Mhm. Great. And we'll talk a lot more about what the program does offer. I thought maybe it's helpful also just to get a sense of how it differs maybe from other things that the journalism school offers, which, we're very well known for our master's programs, which are, very practical training degrees. Andy, if people are thinking, they look on our website and they see faculty members who teach like podcasting or documentary filmmaking or magazine writing, or they want to take classes kind of in that vein, is this the program that would really suit them, or how does this differ from what they might see in the kind of the things that they'll find on the website for these other programs here?
Yeah, that's a good question. This is not a program for people who want to brush up their journalism skills. This is not a program for people who want to learn how to do podcasts. It's not for people who are interested in teaching the skills of journalism at another university. Uh, we're very separate. We're completely separate from the MS and the MA programs, the practical journalism programs. And the faculty, although some of the PhD faculty teach like the history courses that are required in the journalism master's program, the journalism faculty does not teach any of the PhDs because very few of them have PhD degrees themselves, and that's a requirement, a state educational requirement. So we people on our program are welcome to attend any of the many lectures and events and social events that the school throws. You are fully a member of the journalism school, but those courses are not things that are available to you. The faculty who is available to you, you can find on our website under the faculty advisory committee. And there are, I think, 13 or 14 faculty members from many different divisions in the university who act as our program and can advise dissertations. So we draw on those resources.
Great. And I dropped a link in the chat for people who are here now. I'll share that when we distribute the video too, which has all kind of the key information you might be looking for, including the faculty who are part of the program, as well as some great FAQs. So in case you missed something in this conversation or aren't able to take notes right now, you can find a lot of the information on this page as well. So just keep that in mind as something to check in on as you're thinking about programs to apply to. So, the question is for Andy and Ava. You both have, completed doctoral programs. You have PhDs. I think for people who are watching who, are new to this, they might, maybe going into a doctoral program here or somewhere else in the future. Can you talk a little bit about what it's like to be a doctoral student in the U.S. in terms of the time commitment, the kind of like, year to year life in the program, just to demystify that a bit for people?
Eva, why don't you start? You did it more recently.
Sure. Well, the first few years are, of course, taking a lot of the required courses and selecting which ones, across the university might help guide you in your dissertation or doctoral research. So it feels a lot like being a student with more independence that you had in undergrad. And, I think I took advantage of office hours and meeting and talking to peers a lot more than I had time to in undergrad. So it's very, fully immersive those first 2 years for me at least. And then after that, I really treated it like a job. And it was the best job because I could wake up and think about, what do I want to read today or write or think about? There's a lot of applying to conferences and talking to other academics who are in similar research areas. So in that sense, it's not only like having your own job. It's, I think it's akin to almost having a startup where you're not totally sure what you're doing or how you're going to get there. But you're really passionate about it and you're trying to figure out what parts of your reading and your conversations are clicking and helping you create hopefully something new. Yeah, so for me, it was a great mix of feeling like I was back in undergrad, but more fully immersed, and then having kind of agency in those last 2 years to write and connect with folks that are smarter than I am.
You mentioned the word passion, and I think that's really important to keep in mind too. A PhD program, I loved doing a PhD. I loved being a student. It was like the most wonderful thing I ever did. But it can be long, it can be lonely, it can be challenging. You can feel like you'll never get done. You can feel like you'll never make any money. All of those things are part of that process too. And the things that always helped me were to find to be active within my cohort of students of fellow students, to talk to faculty members who about my issues, to look on the bright side as much as I could and realize, yes, this is something I chose to do that I really love. And there are some moments that are less inspiring than other moments, but I want to do this. It's a big investment of time and commitment and money, and possibly you have a family who's sharing that commitment. It's a decision to think through carefully, but it can be a really wonderful decision.
Great. And Andy, we talked a little bit in general about the program, but in terms of the first like few years of the program, what can students expect in terms of what kind of years you're doing coursework and kind of how you progress through the different stages of doing a
Mhm.
doctorate?
Yeah, depending on whether or not you have done previous acceptable graduate level work, you may get transfer credits of up to 2 semesters or 1 year for previous work you've done in a relevant graduate program whose work was acceptable and leads toward your continuing the process at Columbia. So those decisions about whether you get advanced standing are made in after you've enrolled. We don't make those decisions first. Oddly enough, if you've done a journalism degree, a practical skills journalism degree, those credits are usually not transferable because those are not academic courses. And again, state law has policies about that. So if you come with no previous relevant graduate experience, you will do for the first 3 years, you will do full-time coursework, which is around 4 courses a semester. You will be also working on your various independent research projects, more and more immersive in those once as you go along. At the end of the 3 years, you take a series of qualifying exams, which we have two different options, and the student chooses which one to pursue. One of them is standard. It's a very traditional. You read a bunch of books. You meet with your committee, you write answers to their questions, you sit with them and talk about it, and then you're done. And that's one possibility. Or you do a series of tasks that anyone on the job market as a beginning academic would usually do. You write a syllabus, you present a paper at a conference, you submit a paper to a journal. So there's a lot of outside and extra work, but leading directly toward your dissertation that you're doing all along too. After your first 3 years, or if you have advanced standing after your first 2 years, you are much more independent. You are freed from the coursework. Sometimes people take jobs, sometimes people move back to where they've come from. But that's when you do the really intensive work on the qualifying exams and the dissertation. So all in all, it takes anywhere from the fastest anybody has ever done it is about 4 years with advanced standing. More likely it's around 5, 6, or 7 years from start to finish. But you don't need to be on campus the whole time of those years.
Great. And Ava, you mentioned creative writing classes and things you took. Can you talk a little bit more about some of the highlights of, some of the coursework and faculty you got to work with as you took classes here at Columbia?
Yeah, I mean, I think within our own department, there were great classes like Andy's Journalism in Society, which gives you a good framework for, what is the history of this profession and how has it been negotiated over time. So I really enjoyed that because you don't know what you don't know until you are in the classroom. And that was just a good grounding exercise. And then in SEPA, there's a professor, Anya Schifrin, who teaches a global media and innovation course, which I found really captivating. I think sometimes we can be very focused on what's going on in the US, but getting that global perspective was also very useful in terms of different media models and journalistic models. Also, we have access, you can apply to take classes at NYU, and Rod Benson at NYU's Media Communications and what is it? Media Communications, MCC. I forget what the last C is for. But he also teaches a kind of a media ownership course, which I found really interesting as I was studying business models behind journalism and other forms of new media. So those were some standout classes. There's also, David Stark in the sociology department. So getting those different perspectives of how can I tackle a research project was also very useful for me.
Mhm. It was such a multidisciplinary program. How was it kind of just trying to figure out which departments, which people to kind of tap into? Was it something you did a lot of research about in advance, or did you discover things as you kind of went through the program?
Yeah, I mean, as Andy mentioned, you'll have moments of loneliness. So connecting with your peers in the J school, talking to them about, I took this class. What did you think of this other one? Even taking classes together with some of your peers can give you someone to chat with who's not in the department necessarily that you're taking the course with. So I would just say, as much as I think people are antisocial by going into PhD programs, try to be as social as you can in learning and sharing with other folks in the department. So talking and then also kind of treat it like you're at a restaurant, you're ordering off of a menu, try a lot of different things. You never know what will give you an idea. Because, there are things that really surprised me about history taking up such a great deal of my own dissertation. I never thought that would be the case, but I was really struck by, again, how much I didn't know and parallels between the present moment and the past. So yeah, I would say be curious and talk to people.
Great advice. And you mentioned the dissertation. Andy, could you speak a little bit about what the dissertation process is like for a student in this program, and what are maybe some subject areas that students have focused on in the past for their dissertations?
Yeah, we expect that people coming into the program have some idea of what they want to study. We do not want a long specific proposal. We do not want to hear from you which professors you're going to work with. All of that evolves after you get here. So we don't want you to come already set on your path. We want you to find your path when you're here. But there's plenty of opportunity for people to converse, talk, have workshops, speak with each other, to help you focus your research questions. There is a dissertation seminar that specifically is pointed toward that. This is how you figure out your topic. Here's how you write an abstract. So there's work that you do all along the way toward identifying your topic. Sometimes people come in with a pretty good idea of what interests them, and they come out having written a dissertation about that. Sometimes people come in thinking, oh, I'm going to do this. This is really interesting. And they're completely changed by the time they're done and they've written a dissertation they never would have expected. So we want you to be open to that process. But we also assist you as much as we can in finding that way. So the things that students have been working on, current and recent students lately, topics like the relationship between journalism and curiosity, the history of nonviolent activism, deep fakes and gendered violence, women's bathrooms as communicative spaces, binge watching, the media ecosphere of white Christian nationalism, the uses of political satire, US government surveillance of religious institutions. So you can see it's a wide range, and some of them are very much squarely in the communications or journalism studies realm, and some of them are much more elusive, I guess.
Mhm.
But some of these areas we're very prepared to work with you. Some of them, sometimes people do things that are a little bit outside of our bailiwick, and we think that's great because we like having the opportunity for everybody's ideas to bump against everybody's ideas. So don't worry if what you're thinking about pursuing doesn't seem to be on our list. People often shape and the process of shaping goes both ways.
Great. And Ava, can you tell us a bit about your dissertation topic, what that turned out to be, and what it was like doing the research and writing of that?
Yeah, so I knew that I wanted to study advertising and journalism and some of the ethical questions I was dealing with when I was working at the Times. But to Andy's point, the way that I went about it and the story that I ended up telling in my dissertation was wildly different from what I had written about or thought I would be studying. And so I ended up taking a historical view of what's the relationship between advertisers and the news, and then what does it look like today? And what are some of the reasons this tension will continue to exist? What are levers we can pull to change that relationship? So maybe we could get more transparency behind commercially funded news organizations. Then, the latter half of the book really focused, or the dissertation really focused on what happens when news hits social media algorithms and how they spread. Are there ways to regulate this? And what does it mean for media literacy, where the research can be mixed about, if someone knows about these challenges, does it actually help them, stop the spread of maybe deceptive messages? So that's where I kind of ended up taking the research project. Russ, did that answer your question?
I think so, yeah. And you said book for a second, so just to say to people, I think this is being turned into a book currently. Is that right?
Yeah, it seems like an ever-evolving project. Yes, I wrote the dissertation in the hopes of turning it into a book, which was, everyone was fully supportive of in the program. And now I'm in the process of editing that manuscript. So hopefully I can send it off to my publisher.
Awesome. Great. And Andy, just talking more about what people do when they finish the degree, this is it's a big investment. What does kind of the investment lead to for people? What kind of career paths do people often go on when they earn a doctorate like this?
Well, many people come hoping to teach communications in another program, and many of them have that. Many of them do get jobs there. We have a really amazing job placement. I would say I've kept in touch since we're a relatively recent program. We started in 1998, and I've been here that whole time. And I know where almost all of our graduates are, and I would say about half of them now have tenured or tenure track jobs, which is a pretty amazing result. They work all sorts of places. They work at American University, George Washington, Muhlenberg College, Vassar, Stony Brook, Yale, University of Chicago, UMass Amherst, all over the place. Some international institutions as well. But we also are very welcoming to students who do not want to follow the teaching path, and that's fine. We encourage people to follow other paths if that's what interests them. And some of our other students have done everything from um, they've gone back to writing, to book writing or journalism. They work in consulting or strategy or in finance. They work in nonprofits. They work in government. They teach in other than universities. They write journalism. So they I don't know of anybody who has been looking for a tenured track job or a teaching job who has failed to find one. They may still be on the hunt, but they're still looking. But as I say, there are plenty of other routes to follow, and we encourage all of those.
Mhm. Great. And Ava, can you talk a bit about your career path since you finished the program?
Yeah, I mean, I will say I wasn't sure what I wanted to do after the program. I really fell in love with teaching while I was in the program. So I'd considered that and applied for some teaching jobs. And then just as time evolved, I realized my real passion was how do I make information more accessible and kind of explain complex things in hopefully simpler ways or more accessible ways. So I ended up going back into the corporate world in a consulting firm, which allows me to do that for the research the consulting company puts out. And I'm able to teach on the side at NYU, which is lovely. So, I think the program offers a lot of flexibility if you're willing to kind of carve out that path for yourself. And then I have many peers who are teaching full time and enjoying that.
Great. And what kind of things, you mentioned, just the kind of the way your research has led to some of the things you're doing in your career, but what kind of things did you learn at Columbia that have been really helpful, both in your work where you are and also in your teaching?
Yeah, I mean, I think you realize through the program how little you know, even on topics that you think that you're an expert in or might be an expert in. Not only because things are constantly changing, but because there's a great deal of complexity around very simple topics. And that's what I enjoy bringing into my own professional life now. You know, you can think about challenges that CEOs have, and it's not just about their bottom line and financial statements. It's also about more emotional concepts, or how are they communicating both internally and externally? How do those messages differ? And kind of what are the history of corporations, and how does it shape, law today and what they're bringing to market? So there are these kind of strange applications that have nothing to do with your dissertation topic and have everything to do with the muscle that you build in the program of being skeptical of your own output, questioning and redlining and editing your own words, always looking for, is there a different perspective on this? Because that's what you'll be challenged to do throughout the doctoral program. So it's kind of that, Todd Gitlin, who sadly has passed from the program, had mentioned, there's a deal of being intellectually curious, and the PhD is a playground for that. And that stays with you regardless of what you do after.
Great. And kind of going back to our beginning of the conversation about your own kind of experience in doctoral programs, what would you say to people who are in this session or watching this later who are just thinking about a doctoral program in general, about maybe going into that? What advice would you have in terms of how they should think about researching schools, thinking about whether they should apply or not to a program that would be, as kind of long term and such a commitment as this?
Yeah, I mean, it is a massive commitment. And, as I said at the start, for me, it felt like I didn't have a choice. It felt like something I needed to do. And as Andy mentioned, you have a lot of moments of, I don't know if I'm going to finish this, and a lot of doubts, and it's intense, and you don't know if you're making progress. And it's just, things can feel a little ambiguous by design when you're doing thinking work, and especially writing. So I would just say, really, as much as you research programs and think about your own interests, also sit with yourself on a more emotional level and think about, is this something that I feel I have the bandwidth to take on? And is this something that I feel really passionate about to get me through some of those darker moments? I say that as someone who is thrilled that I went through this, and I can't imagine another path for me. But I also want to acknowledge that there's just a mental toll, and it can feel lonely, and you might be moving cities, and there are all of these different considerations. So as much as I could talk to you about finding alignment between faculty or peers at a university, also really check in with your own personal goals. Do I really see myself on a path where this program advances something for me that is meaningful, or do I have other concerns, financial or otherwise, that I need to consider?
Mhm. Great. And almost every year we have people who are interested in this program who want to write to staff in our office, faculty at the school, to want to like get an assessment of their research ideas before they apply, to get all this feedback and kind of, one-on-one before they apply. And unfortunately, we just don't have the bandwidth to be able to do those kinds of things just because of the volume of applicants and the amount of things that are going on at the school. So, Andy, for people who are thinking about this program and kind of what might be something that would be a successful application, what should people kind of think about in terms of how to research the programs that they're applying for and what you look for in a strong application to the doctoral program?
Yeah. The single best piece of advice I can suggest for people who are trying to make a decision about applying here is take a look on our web pages. We have two pages that are particularly relevant for you. One is recent dissertations, and they includes abstracts of the past, I don't know, I think most of the dissertations for the past 5 years, as well as others that have been published as books, and many of them have. So there's that. And then there's also the student bio page, which is current students who choose to post a bio about what about their path here. They don't have to, it's not required. So that will give you a good idea. If you look through some of the topics that people are interested in and you say, yeah, that sounds cool to me, that's a good sign. That's a sign this might be the right place. If you look through all of those and you don't see anything that makes you think that's cool, that's another thing that it tells you. If you decide to apply, the most important aspect of the application for us is your statement of research interests. As I said, we don't want a fully formed dissertation proposal. We don't want a fully formed book proposal. If you've got that, just go off and write it and don't come. We work with you. We want to help you form your ideas. But we want to know what those ideas are, and we want to know how they can be served in an interdisciplinary program, why an interdisciplinary program feels right to you and what you think you would get out of it and contribute to it. If you have a really great idea that's interesting to you, that pushes all your buttons, but that would be easily satisfied in a more traditional non-interdisciplinary program, if it's something you could write in a history department, it might be better for you to go to the history department. What we look for is people who have ideas that cross boundaries, that cross disciplines, that bump up against each other and inform each other. So if you have that kind of idea, tell us about that kind of idea and tell us how you got it. Tell us influences on you and that shaped your thinking, or experiences that shaped your thinking. Think about maybe things you've read that were important to you. But you can get a pretty good idea from our website of whether this feels exciting to you.
Great, that's great advice. So we have a bit of time now, about maybe 10 minutes or so, for questions from people who are viewing right now. So if you want to put a question in the chat, you're welcome to do that. Just address them to me, Ross, the host, and then I can look through those. And I would say at the outset, if it's really long, multiple paragraphs, very specific, we probably won't be able to answer that very well in this kind of session. So you can reach out to me at apply.journalism@columbia.edu. But if you have kind of general questions that we can address in the session, please put those in the chat and we can talk about them. So we can do that here. Okay, question. Somebody wanted to know more about the chimera nature of interdisciplinary research. Is it more because of the curriculum design or because of the people that it's interdisciplinary? This person wants to know.
I would say it's the design of the curriculum. The program was set up as I said, in 1998. And the idea then was we're going to touch on various aspects. We are not going to have a list of the communications courses that you take. We are going to offer the students the opportunity to create their own interdisciplinary study. So from the beginning, that was our defining goal. And we've kept to that pretty well. We have a student ends up taking, oh, depending on advanced standing, anywhere from what is it, 20 to 30 courses over the course of the process. And the students have choices for about well, I guess 5 or 6 are required, and the rest of them are choices. So it's up to the student. It's up to you to explore the options and see what works.
Mhm. Great. And a question about how many students are usually in a admitted cohort per year here?
3. We're very tiny,
Mhm.
but we have a great student faculty ratio because we also have usually 3 professors. So it's very favorable.
Mhm. Yeah, and Ava, maybe I'll just follow up with that. What's it like to be in a kind of a small community like that, and what are the relationships like between different students within the PhD program?
I enjoyed it because it was very intimate. You get to know your cohort and kind of go through the process together. So yeah, I mean, I really liked having a small cohort. It was easy to gather and share ideas. I had a writing group in later years with some of them, so that was helpful for feedback. And as Andy mentioned, you do get a lot of one-on-one attention. I mean, I can't count the number of times I knocked on her door and asked her very small and large questions. So that's a nice perk.
Great. And a question here about opportunities for doctoral students to do like international or fieldwork based research.
If that's a possibility, the challenge is always finding funding for that. At any university, that's going to be a challenge. We have a modest budget to help students do things like attend conferences where they are presenting a paper, or to travel somewhere to do research. But as I say, that's a modest chunk. Most students, um, if they do international research, they tend to do it in the summer on their own. But it's also there are a lot of opportunities at Columbia. Columbia has lots of connections with international institutions and universities. So there's a lot that can be done here, based here, using the connections that Columbia has internationally.
Mhm. Question here and about how many students do usually PhD faculty at the J School have in terms of, or how many people are they usually supervising at a given time?
Oh, that's an interesting question. That varies too. A lot of it depends. The core faculty at the journalism school this year consists of me, I'm a historian, Richard John, who's a historian, and Michael Schudson, who's a sociologist. So students sort of self-select based on their topic, but they can also work with and be advised by the members of our international interdisciplinary committee who come from international affairs, history, comparative literature, law. So it varies every year depending on what students are working with. But I would say normally anywhere from 4 to 7.
Yeah.
And it can shift every year.
Mhm. And a question about whether doctoral candidates have the opportunity to work with their supervisors to apply for grants. So, kind of thinking about that in the future.
Yeah, and again, grants are harder and harder to get. I don't know whether you tried for any. When I began here, there were lots of dissertation completion grants out there in the world. There were organizations that offered lots of funding. A lot of that has dwindled away in many different places. Do you have any thoughts on applications for grants?
I think it was run pretty independently. I applied for a few. I did notice by the end of my time at Columbia, it started to feel like the it had been tightened up a little bit, and it was harder to get that. But I believe there's a grant writing workshop that a few members of
Mm.
other cohorts put together. So it's one that I would almost look and lean more on your peers than necessarily expect a full structure from advisors.
Mm.
Great. And here's some common questions we get that someone has asked. One about kind of just what funding looks like if you're admitted to this program, just in general. I know this is on our website as well, but Andy, is there's kind of a general answer in terms of what the funding is usually for doctoral students at the university?
Yeah, students who begin starting as of last year, any incoming student, full-time student, you need to study full-time. There is no financial aid for anyone who does not study full-time, and in fact, we don't accept people who don't study full-time. But if you come in, you will have tuition. Your tuition is waived for the 2 or 3 years that you do coursework. You receive a living stipend for it's now at 5 years after your first enrollment. It's I don't know the amount offhand. It's significant, but New York is a very expensive city. So many people find they need to supplement their stipends with savings, with family contributions, with summer work. If you're an international student, those options are limited, so you need to take that into account. The you also have receive waivers for various other fees like health insurance for 6 years after your first enrollment, or 6 or 7, depending on advanced standing, um, and various other fees like that. But essentially, it's tuition is waived, and you have a 5 year stipend. In return for the stipend, you do service for the school or for the program, teaching assistants, research assistants, assistants in some of the research centers at the journalism school, and those are obligations that come with your financial aid.
Mhm. Great. And a question we get sometimes about the admissions requirements. Currently, the GRE is a requirement that will not be waived. People often ask that. And maybe just to shed light, even though we don't have a minimum score for that, what's the importance kind of that you see in the score from a GRE?
Yeah, we have no cutoff score. We don't drop out people because of GRE scores. We take it as one measure of your achievements, and we understand, especially if you've been out in the world a lot, if for a while, if you're not applying straight out of college, and many of our applicants are applying from later in their lives than straight out of college. So we understand that for some of those applicants, the idea of the GRE can be really daunting, and they go, oh my God, math. Don't sweat it. Don't worry about it. Don't spend a whole lot of money taking prep courses. It is not going to make or break your application one way or another. It is one piece of information that we use to put together a sense of how you are as a potential applicant.
Great. And a question for Ava, just about kind of what aspects of the PhD journey were the most challenging?
It's really hard to measure progress. I think in other paths you take, I achieved X amount this year or this quarter, but with a PhD, it's always in flux. You're always learning more and editing and changing things. So it was just hard for me not to have clear markers. I think the flip side to that is you feel really good when you write a chapter or speak at a conference, and that feels like a win. So just personally for me, that was something to navigate.
Great. And a question, someone has kind of proposed, a research idea again. So as we were saying earlier, I think what we'll suggest is that there's not one you can really reach out to necessarily to have, a yes or no for a research proposal in advance of applying to the program. But as Professor Tucker was saying, to look up what other people have been doing, in this program and get a sense on whether your particular interests, maybe have some kind of connection with what we've been able to support in the past. And maybe another thing, Andy, would be to kind of look at the other faculty and the interdisciplinary kind of group who do that kind of research or that kind of study too. Anything else you would suggest for people?
Yeah, the people on our interdisciplinary committee are very important to our program, and they are interested in our students and sometimes are the main advisor for our students. So yeah, take a look at the kind of work they do. One thing I should also mention is you do not need to have a supervisor identified in order to apply. I know that's the custom in particularly in international universities. You do not need to have somebody nailed down as your supervisor. We don't encourage it. We don't even permit it. We want you to find your way when you're here with our help, but we don't expect you to have done that before.
Mhm. And another question, I think people will find the answer to this by looking at the dissertation topics that are on the website, but is it important that, people do research related to the West, or can we support research on other parts of the globe?
Oh, we can support research on other parts of the globe. Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, I think you'll find that if you look at the different examples. I noticed,
Mm.
I can't think of the specifics, but whenever I've looked through that, it's a really great range of global research. That's
Yeah. One of our recent graduates did a dissertation on politics in Brazil, for instance.
Mhm. Well, great. I think that's probably a good moment to wrap up. That's been a good
Okay.
questions, everybody. Definitely do a lot of research, as we've been saying, explore what students have done here in the past, see what the faculty are experts in here and in the interdisciplinary committee. And I think having a real idea of what you want to potentially pursue in terms of some of the questions, even though you don't need to have a fully baked dissertation idea, is a great idea too. But definitely, check out this page that Professor Tucker and others have worked on that has FAQs, a lot of details about the program on our website, and you can find a lot of answers, throughout the fall there if you need to come back to it for some more, just some more insight into what we do here. But thank you, Andy. Thank you, Ava, for all of your answers and for talking so much in great detail about what this experience could be like for people.
And thank you all for coming. We appreciate your interest.
Great. And as you might know, you have about a little over 2 months to put together an application for this program. Our deadline for the PhD application will be December 15th. So we're about October 1st exactly today. So that means you have 2 months and 2.5 months basically to get an app in. So please continue to do that research. Check in with the apply.journalism at columbia.edu address if you have any questions we can help you with. And definitely check out that website and do your research. And we hope to be in touch over the coming weeks. Have a great rest of your day. Thanks again. Bye, everybody.